Hi everyone, it's QuickyBaby and welcome back to World of Tanks, and today we've got the pleasure of watching Stash B from the European server playing in an absolute Soviet boot of a vehicle. It is the Object 263. So the Object 263 has been in World of Tanks for a pretty darn long time, and it spent most of its time in World of Tanks at tier 10. This vehicle was kind of your all-purpose assault tank destroyer, drive everywhere, do everything that was required for close quarters combat. It always had a lower plate that was truly horrific, but if you could manage to avoid your opponents catching your lower plate, this thing had speed, it had damage per minute, and it had a pretty funky kind of in the middle alpha damage compared to a lot of the other tier 10 tank destroyers. Tier 10 tank destroyers, for the most part, get 750 alpha damage. This vehicle, on the other hand, has 550, but a much better rate of fire. Well, at least back when it was a tier 10. Wargaming decided that it wasn't really a fit for that tech tree, and so they dropped down the Object 263 to tier 9, got rid of the ill-fated SU-122-54, which is a completely forgettable vehicle. Nobody even asks Wargaming to bring it back, and I'm truly hoping that it wouldn't be a well-deserved reward inside World of Tanks this year. Spoilers, I'm kind of hoping it's going to be the VK2801 with the 105mm, but more on that probably at a later date this month, if of course Wargaming bring back the well-deserved reward. So they moved the 263 down to tier 9, got rid of the SU-122-54, and then the Object 268 version 4, currently the best tier 10 tank destroyer, was put in its place at tier 10. The 263 at tier 9, it's definitely not bad, as Stash B is going to be showing you today. That this vehicle, again, if you hide the lower plate, don't expose it, you're blocking all amounts of damage. Stash B has already managed to block 1,400 this game. We'll be blocking substantially more before this video is done today, let me just tell you that. And still, the combat capacity of this vehicle is pretty decent. Now, nobody's really going to jump for joy at the idea of having 270mm of standard penetration and 300mm of APCR rounds. But again, this vehicle isn't meant to be one of those classic tank destroyers at tier 9 that has real big guns and tries to kind of overmatch the enemy armor with a large caliber, or just has enough penetration on the round to be able to bludgeon its way through even thick or even angled plates. The 263 is designed more to be kind of an in-your-face assault tank. Listen to the mobility statistics for this vehicle. 55 forwards, 20 backwards, a power-to-weight ratio of over 18, and a pretty darn good traverse speed, which you can pump all the way up. As Stash turns his vehicle just in time to be able to shut down the Bat-Chatillon 12T. Interestingly enough, with that shot, the Bat-Chat must have disappeared just before the shell registered, and so the damage that Stash did to the Bat-Chat didn't exactly count on the damage counter here, and keep that in mind as we're going through the rest of the replay. So Stash is electing to fire APCR rounds here, I guess because he just wants to have the extra shell velocity, doesn't really need the extra penetration against the CS-53 in this scenario, who was spotted on about 600 hit points, and again, disappeared just before Stash's round hit the vehicle, possibly. So when we see that CS-52 lease once again appear, we'll have to take a look, and I'm sure that Stash is probably waiting as well, maybe even have a quick sneaky glimpse when the CS-52 gets spotted again to see if that damage did count. Let me know if you do that as well in the comments down below. It looks like Stash is actually having a look, has a gander at the CS-52 lease, and probably has like a mini fist pump as realizing that the CS-52 lease has about 550 hit points less than when they were previously spotted. So here is that WZ-121FT that actually took a substantial amount of Stash B's hit points earlier on in the battle. But luckily for him, it seems like this WZ-121 is either AFK or just having a real hard time trying to process the game that they are playing. Now that happens to all of us in World of Tanks. It definitely happens to me, especially after I've been playing this game for about 6 or 7 hours in a row with a 3-minute break while trying to entertain thousands of people out there on Twitch. But yeah, maybe the WZ-120 in that scenario. Disconnects happen, although usually you would auto-forward. Possibly just got called down for dinner, or just had an epiphany moment. This game is a big waste of time. I'm going to move on to do something else. That's just the Thursday evening relevations that you also can have, although this game didn't take place today, in a Tier 8 Premium Chinese tank destroyer. Alright, so Stash B, having reclaimed the middle of the map, fallen back from it earlier, is now going to have to try and deal with not one, but two tortoises on the enemy team. Now, a tortoise by itself, if you've got it set up correctly, has 4,000 to 4,500 DPM, depending on how pay to win you are. And so these two vehicles could be able to kill multiple mouse, like 3 mouse in a single minute. That makes them exceptionally dangerous in this scenario. But I tell you what isn't exceptionally dangerous about the tortoise. When it's having to deal with multiple flanks, it can't quite get those shots in, it's caught out without being able to use its poor mobility to be able to close the distance, and it's having to deal with a Soviet boot of a tank, which is hiding its lower plate. And this is where damage per minute just doesn't mean anything. And this is where having a huge weak point on top of your tank also doesn't mean anything. But we don't have time to think about that, because a KV-4 just fired a high explosive anti-tank round at Stash B's vehicle. Okay, there's only one gun on the KV-4 that actually fires heat, and that's the gun before the 107mm, meaning that the KV-4 is going to have quite a poor reload compared to if it was using the top gun. And now we can see the stock turret on the KV-4 as well bounces another heat round off Stash's tank and vanquishes the Tier 8 Soviet heavy tank. How rude of you to interrupt an Object 263 farming the Tier 9 British tank destroyers for pretty much everything they've got in that scenario. So now Stash B goes back to dealing with the tortoises, and not a moment too soon, because the tortoises have killed the Borsig and the T-28, although they've lost nearly 4,000 hit points between them to be able to handle that. And unfortunately, as the Emil on Stash's team goes down, he is left in a 1 versus 6 scenario, quickly making that down to a 1 versus 5 situation. So in this situation, Stash needs to be as quick as he can to get rid of this tortoise to stop the ensuing masses. There's 4 medium tanks on the enemy team. That is a nightmare scenario for a tank destroyer to have to deal with. Heavy tanks, sure, slow lumbering behemoths, you've got a good chance of dealing with them frontally. Medium tanks, they're fast, they can get your side, they can track you, they can flank you, they can surround you, they've got good view range to be able to see you from decent distances as well. And I love what Stash is doing here. He's not wanting to get caught where the enemies are going to be able to get his side. So he's going to get hulled down into a position where he'll have his front towards the Indian Panzer with an awesome opportunity as well to hide his lower plate or even most of the side armor on his vehicle and still deal with the enemies if they're good players and they come from the south. And oh god, yes they are. There's the Type 59. Stash stays on target and shuts down the Indian Panzer, reducing this 1 versus 6 to a 1 versus 3. Stash started this fight with 4,000 hit points to deal with, even though he only had 500 hit points left to his name. And he has quickly halved the enemy's hit points in a 1 versus 6 scenario. Now up to 7,500 damage that Stash has seen. He is quickly picking apart the Type 59, and the CS-53 looks like they're firing high explosive rounds at the side of Stash B's tank. Maybe to be able to track them. Maybe because they don't know how to play this game. Who's going to judge that? But in this situation, Stash doesn't care. He puts another round into the CS-53, now putting his damage total up to 8,500 that we've seen, locking down the tracks of the Polish Tier 8 medium tank, finishing them off, and there's the T-44 appearing above him with 175 hit points, ricochets a shell from the T-44, and now's a tricky scenario where the T-44 is kind of hulled down, and this isn't the most accurate of tanks. I stand corrected. I guess this is the most accurate of tanks, as Stash B absolutely slams down, if the blind shots hit, a 10,000 damage game in a Tier 9 tank destroyer, picking up 9 kills to their name and securing the Columbanos medal for standing alone against at least 6. With 500 hit points to Stash B's name, and near 5,000 on the enemy team in that scenario, that's got to get a round of applause from me. But you know what's absolutely heartbreaking about this replay? Is it looks like Stash B might have been going for some of the missions to get the Object 260. And even after, to all intents and purposes, 10,000 damage dealt and 20 penetrating shots, you didn't actually manage to get more than 2 crits in this game. So Stash B takes down a career's worth of medals from this round of World of Tanks. The one that everybody wants, the Columbanos medal for standing alone against at least 5, in this case 6, a Radley Walters medal for the 9 kills, a Defender's medal for protecting against those tier 9 British tank destroyers, over 100 base defense points, a high caliber for 10,442 damage. I guess those 2 shells did manage to hit, a Spartan medal for ricocheting with less than 10% of his hit points remaining, and a steel wall for managing to block 3,290 damage, enough to kill the vehicle 1.5 times over. And should we even mention the ace tanker here? Stash B gets over 2,000 base experience, and considering this is a tier 9 tech tree tank, that is simply preposterous. So Stash B, congratulations to you on this absolute gargantuan replay, and also your second mark of excellence. If you keep playing like this, it's not going to be long before an additional star is added to the Soviet tank destroyer's barrel. I really loved the way that you stayed focused even in an inflexible tank and just pretty much did everything right. Towards the middle and latter part of this game, you played absolutely flawlessly, and it was a pleasure to watch. Thank you so much for uploading your replay on the What Replays website, and I hope that I did your replay any kind of justice. Anyway, I hope all of you lovely ladies and gentlemen out there enjoyed this video. If you did, give it a thumbs up. If you hated it, give it a thumbs down. And let me know in the comments down below if you missed the Object 263 at tier 10, or if you feel that it's even sweeter at tier 9. And as always, thank you so much for watching. You've been epic, and hopefully I'll see you soon.